And now, here is Coretta McDonald, Member of Parliament and host of Advancing the Cause.
Everything that is true we share in this program. We share with you highlights of what is happening in the country, around the Caribbean, and for those who are close to us. And so I want to welcome you once again to another episode, like I said, of Advancing the Cause. Just before we get into our real program for this evening, I want to share with you some highlights. I'm not going to go into a whole lot because we've got quite an interesting talk this evening. And you know, this evening our talk is security and crisis. As a matter of fact, the entire country is in crisis. Everything just falling apart. And very soon, maybe some of us will start floating away with the oil. But for our highlights for this evening, and before I give you the highlights, let me welcome all those who are watching us. I know we usually have our persons from the US, persons from the UK, persons from Canada, persons from within the Caribbean, and just about everywhere. As a matter of fact, last week I was cautioned that I need to say hi to our folks in Switzerland. It's late now, but they are up and they are watching this program. And thank you for watching us from way out there in Switzerland. And so our highlights for this evening, healthcare. Our healthcare is in crisis. In Mabaruma, I'm learning that we have just one driver there for the ambulance, one ambulance driver. And so you can understand when we have issues, what happens there. And so the indigenous struggle continues. And so Minister Frank Anthony, you have quite a lot of work to do. And we expect you to do just that. The people of Guyana deserve better. Our Amerindian brothers and sisters, they deserve better. So come on, do what you have to do. Yes, you've been installed, but we expect you to do what you have to do because you're holding the seat of or as Minister of Health. And then we have the other big one, new ferry service for Region 1. And in Region 1, we're going to be having a new ferry there. And that ferry is going to be coming from India. I have a photograph that I'll show you a little later where we are going to compare what we have now with what is expected to come. And you know, in this day and age, I don't know how is it that we are looking to buy those kinds of boats. But my folks, you are going to be the judge and you will tell me whether our taxpayers' dollars are being used for the benefit of us, or they're used as gifts for friends and families and some those who are near and some who are far away from us. And again, we go with oh gosh, this one is hitting and it's trending all over. We have the issue of the road cop who shot and killed a young man, but we're going to get more into that. And I want to share with you again, we're talking about road cops, and we have another road cop who was charged with stealing cannabis from the police station. Imagine that, a cop charged with stealing cannabis from the police station. And I would suspect that that would have been cannabis that was seized or confiscated after a raid, and that there would have been used as the evidence. And so here is it, we have a cop stealing the cannabis from the police station. And then we have a Coretta high car driver who has been charged for rape of a school girl. And that's so much so for our highlights this evening. And we are going to be having quite an exciting time. And so for all those who are watching, call your friend, call your neighbor, call your sister, call your brother. Just tell them Advancing the Cause is on, and it's time for them to share the link. Tune in and share the link. With me this evening, one of my guests here this evening he's no stranger to any of us. He has served this country with distinction, and he has given service quite a lot in different capacities. And this young man that I'm talking about, he served as the top cop, which is the commissioner of police. He served as a former commissioner of police, and he also served as a minister in the APNU AFC government. And so I want to welcome to this forum no other than Comrade Winston Felix, former Minister of Citizenship. Thank you for being here with us and advancing the cause.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for your kind words of welcome.
Well, Mr. Felix, like everything else, we know that you have given distinguished service to this country. And when we talk about security, that's right there down your alley. And our topic for this evening says security in crisis. And it's not only security in crisis, but it encompasses everything else. So our people are in crisis when we talk about security. Your thoughts, just your broad thoughts on that for now.
Well, based on the number of criminal matters coming before us, there is this tendency to feel that security is indeed in crisis. You have policemen doing all sorts of things, all sorts of crime. You spoke about cannabis. There was one hijacking a hire car the other day. There are reckless shootings by the police, and the number of incidents occurring involving members of the law enforcement agency and in society, the crimes being committed, the frequency they are committed. And in some cases, we are not hearing about charges. It is not difficult to consider the security situation in this country as being in crisis. And so I think your topic is appropriate. We need to see more evidence of quick action by the police where crimes are committed. We need to see that there's evidence of planning. Take, for example, they had a show, I think they call it the Botheration Show.
Well, Mr. Felix, just before you go there, I just wanted you to give us a little bit of introduction into your thoughts about the security. We're going to get into that.
Okay, well,
we're going to get right there.
I'll hold back on that.
But I just wanted you to share with us very quickly your stint as a policeman and where that would have taken you in terms of ranks.
Well, my stint of a policeman started after training. I spent 6 years on the East Coast, East Demerara, performing between the ranks of constables and corporals at police station and then in the registry. In those days, we did foot and bicycle patrols. When we went out on those patrols, we walked with the occurrences. What we call occurrences were those reports made by members of the public which were not immediately responded to. So we went out and responded to them. And this was so on every station on the East Coast. Whether you started at Sparendam or you ended up at Maikoni, the system was the same. And consequently, in those days, the reports of police in action were few. You may have had more reports of police overaction. But within, let's say, the past 20 odd years, we find that there's less emphasis on policemen on beats and patrols, we find police in a containerized situation. They move around in vehicles. As I moved up the line, I have had to deal with many of these problems. As an assistant superintendent in Lethem, as a divisional commander in Borbis, these problems faced us. You had to be strong in your command and control to get the people at the stations to do things correctly, to respond to reports, to serve the public with courtesy, and allow them to feel dignified when they are in the presence of the police. And even when I was commissioner, we started to ensure that, and I had a program, I developed a program to ensure that police responded promptly to reports. I had some successes and I had some failures which I had to deal with very firmly. But generally, I think that looking at the police performance over the years, I want to feel that there has been a decline in the efficiency of the service being offered to the public. And this is where I would like to call upon those in authority to look at the force critically. What is it supposed to be doing? What it is not doing. The force has to be able to criticize itself if it is to improve on the quality of service being delivered to the public. The public deserves the highest quality of service. I know that in all this, training and supervision are important, extremely important. For training, I can't say much, but I am not seeing much evidence of training. The incidents which are occurring suggests that more training and supervision by the corporals, the sergeants, and inspectors need to be enhanced and to hold the constables accountable for what they do. And these are some of the important features which, over the years, I have seen and I have to grapple with to ensure that the quality of service delivered to the public is at a high standard.
Good. So, Mr. Felix, you spoke about what transpired when you were a young cop and when you started moving up the ladder. But we are living in more modern times now. And so we have police cars and we have bikes and so on. But the thing is, I'm hoping that the operators got the photograph there to show us, that clip there to show us. Just recently, we celebrated our independence anniversary, and we had a whole host of activities that were planned to help us to celebrate that occasion. And you know, one of the forums that we had there was what we call the Baderation concert, and by name and nature, we saw the effects of the Baderation concert. And then we had the whole big episode coming out of that Baderation concert with Skeng and Ben. If I were teaching in class reading, then the children, I would have asked the children for rhyming words. So we had Skeng and we had Ben. And we saw Mr. Ben there, the Minister of Home Affairs, issuing a ban on this artiste. I want to say to us that this artiste did not come here by himself, and we all know that he didn't just decide one morning he's coming to Guyana. He had to be contracted. What are the breaches that would have occurred to have caused the Baderation concert to really be the Baderation concert?
Well, in my view, from listening to the stories being told and reading about it on social media, there has been, in that show, a departure by the police from the procedures and practices in place for holding such a concert. Firstly, when I took over in 2004, we had issues with previous concerts. So when the first concert came under my watch in Georgetown, Paul Slow was the divisional commander. And I called him to put some stringent procedures in place to ensure that young people enjoy themselves, but there must be no lawless behavior. And so we came up with a scheme. Firstly, we would call in the organizers, whether at the divisional command level or at the commissioner's level. Mostly is at the divisional command level. And there we would listen to the organizers as to how this concert would be organized. Thereafter, we would tell them this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. For example, we had cut out selling drinks in glass bottles. No concert held in this country could have had in those days a concert where glass bottles were served out to purchasers of drinks. That was one measure to ensure that the patrons to those concerts were relatively safe, that a bottle was not used as a missile or a weapon. Then, because of the size of these concerts, we didn't leave it to a station to take it over and ask them in the normal thing to pay for 5 policemen. The force took over from headquarters. So even if it is done in A Division or B, we in Georgetown had the control levers as to what should take place. Because just as how in Georgetown the commander would have interviewed the sponsors, similarly in Borbis or any other area. And we would have policed that concert from outside, the traffic arrangements. Let's start from there. Ensure that proper traffic arrangements are in place to ensure a smooth flow of traffic, and that everybody can use the road at the same time. Obviously, now and again, you got some bottlenecks, but generally, we try to ensure that there was a smooth flow of traffic. Next, you have the ticket booths outside, which had to be guarded. The entrance, we always ensured that for every concert, there must be identified exits, so that in the event of an emergency, people don't just know about the gate or the entrance from which they came, but they know where they can also escape. And in the program, in the concert itself, we would have had uniformed policemen and others to look after people who come in with weapons. Even if you ban weapons, it is challenging to police it normally, but there are mechanisms that can be put in place to detect weaponry which came in, let's say, through the back door, because we would have said no firearms, no weapons. So some of them would pass through doors and over walls, but we had a measure in place to detect that eventually. We caught some, we didn't catch some. But this lawlessness that took place there showed the absence of proper police planning, execution, and control of the activity. And I trust that if they didn't learn from the past, that this should be the event that should be the example to these policemen today, or these officers of today, for the future. As a matter of fact, I don't want to let tales out to school, but I understand that that was not the advice given, the manner in which that concert was held. I understand that that was not the advice given by very senior people, but I would not go further into that. right? Because of for obvious reasons. But the force needs to be professional, and you can't ban a consort or ban an artist because the consort went wrong. You have to deal with the people who also organized the consort. Because when they sit before you, they will tell you who is coming from where. And obviously, somebody that's you hear the whisperings, this man is a bad man, you're going to sing this song or this song. So you as the police will tell the organizer, you can't tell the man don't sing the song, but he has to be careful what he says in this country. If you allow him to sing the song, he has to be careful what words he is using. He cannot rile up the crowd into bad behavior or lawlessness. Mm-hmm. These are steps which were taken. To the point, before. We had something raising up its head in Sophia named Paso Paso. And we dealt with Paso Paso in a jiffy. It moves from Sophia and eventually came to Norton and John Street. We dealt with it there too. And then it went to Linden. And we stamped on it there too. We don't have Paso Paso today because of the effectiveness of our handling of the situation. I don't feel in my own mind and heart that the upper levels of the police force is really conscious of the role they have to play in maintaining peace and good order in this society, to ensuring that traffic runs smoothly and in an organized manner. I don't think they have a full understanding that they are accountable. Nobody else. The Police Act says who is responsible for what. And if they hold fast to what the Police Act, the dictates of the Police Act, then they would be proceeding in the right direction in the performance of their duties.
Well, Mr. Felix, while I hear you, as a matter of fact, I was so upset because lives could have been lost at that concert. And I was so upset that I was one who championed that we should ban SCEM from coming here. But on a closer look, SCEM was not the person who created the confusion. Of course, SCEM as an artist, he's got to perform an act, he's got to perform a show. He's got to put on a performance there for its patrons and his fans. But the thing is, the promoters, and what we have seen the minister jumping there to do, trying to calm the storm, which is what they do all the time. They're always reactive to everything. And so rather than sanctioning the promoters, they have decided to sanction the artists. But what I noticed is that the managers, the management of SCEM or SCEM, whatever is its name, they did not hesitate to issue a response. And they were very damning when they said the government of Guyana should not seek to place any blame on the artist, because what they're trying to do here is to put him in a light where it can affect his reputation and his performances at other concerts in other countries. They should be blaming their organizers for not doing a proper job. And I remember having Mr. Paul Slow here, who served as an assistant commissioner. And he too was saying that, our promoters now, they want to milk money, but they don't want to spend on security. And I was hoping that the minister, having come out with this big fancy statement of banning SCEM, that he would have also put some form of sanction on the promoters, but we were not seeing any of this. And again, this is how we seem to be operating in this country. One side for this person and another side for that person, animal farm business. Your take on that?
Madam Chair, you are on the ball. I would go back to my earlier point. That is the function of the police. It is the police who should have called in the promoters to understand exactly what is going to take place and to lay down the law. It was the police who was responsible for properly policing the event to ensure that they had a hand on lawlessness wherever it erupts. Their failure to do so is what was responsible for the show living up to its name, Botheration. No botheration, no show. First of all, I would have challenged them why the show has to be named Botheration. It might end up being just that. So sometimes you have to give the promoters some hints that the show might follow the name they give it. And you don't want that, because while we want citizens, young and old, to enjoy themselves, there must be relative safety and absence of lawlessness. These areas fall squarely on the shoulders of the police. You can't escape that. And nobody should come and tell me that the minister said this politician in a high office said, because I know you have to represent your office. And if you can't represent your office, get out. You either represent the office you hold or get out. You can't have it both ways. You can't want to enjoy the office on the one hand and neglect the safety and protection of the citizens on the other hand. That's my position in it. It is the police who must perform this protective function. I don't know if I've answered your question, but by the failure of the police to perform their duties resulted in the lawlessness that took place. Mm-hmm. And this flows from the point where I want to suspect that government may not have laid out adequate policies for the police to follow in their law enforcement functions, or they might not be holding them accountable for these issues when they occur. So the police feel that it is okay to carry on as usual. Nobody would ask me anything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or I can just make this excuse or say that, and it would be accepted. I fail to see that being a reality. What I expect from the police is to anticipate their duties and to ensure that protection of the public is given highest attention by the senior levels of the organization. If you can't do the work, go away.
Simple as that. As simple as that. If you can't do the job, then go. And so we want to take, while the operator is going to put that clip up there with the picture, we're going to say good night to some folks, shout out to some folks. Tommy Gibbs, thanks for being here with us. And he's saying that he has a lot of respect for Mr. Felix for his service to the Guyana Police Force. Emily Scott, Joylyn Thompson, Keith Morian, it's so good to always have you here. Marjorie Primo, Waveney Moore, Bernadette Duncan, Cheryl Welch, so many of you, Dion Graves Sandy, and all of you. Good night to you, and thanks for being here with us. And you know, when you look at those two pictures there, Skeng, I'm hoping that I get the name correctly now. Skeng and Ben, they look like family, you know. They look like family. They look like family. But so much for Skeng and Ben and the ban that we have on these RTs. But again, let me take some of my words back. Where I'd ask for this artist to be banned, it should not have been the artists, it should have been the promoters who should have had a huge penalty placed on their heads for creating the kinds of confusion that we had there.
But Madam Chair, if the police then lay down the standard, what the promoters have to guide them? For you to hold the promoters in breach, then there must be some set of standards which the police laid down and which they breached. But if the police laid down no standard and they were allowed to run free and easy, run wild in hosting this concert, then the result is what we had and what we must expect. I am maintaining that law and order is a police function. And if it is not properly managed, it is not properly performed, you will always get disastrous results. They did not lay down any standard by which this concert should have been held. They did not. So the poor promoters thought that they had a free-for-all, and they did as they saw fit.
Well, that's another part of the discussion we're going to. As a matter of fact, while you were speaking there, it dawned on me that we have an advisor on security, national advisor on security, something to that effect. My good friend, Mr. Jerry Govaya, who's supposed to be the advisor on security. Where was he in all of this? I mean, it seems as if we are just wild. We're just allowing things to go. And I'm hoping that somebody is listening and they can share this with the Minister of Home Affairs, as well as the national, the security on the advisor on national security, that we need to put a policy in place when it comes to hosting events like these.
And again, Madam Chair, let me say this. The advisor on security has a national reach. We're dealing here with public security. The primary function of maintaining public security lies with the police. Yes, it is always good to get advice from an outside source. As a matter of fact, even before I became commissioner, we had a group of called an Impact Advisory Committee, which were civilians, used to meet with Commissioner Larry Lewis coming down the line. And useful suggestions were made. But again, I will not depart from my theme that the police is responsible. I'm saying so because I know that they have history on their side. Nothing that happens now didn't happen before. And many, particularly the current commissioner, he is aware of how we dealt with these large concerts. Because on many occasions, while he was at the TSU, we had the TSU on standby when you deploy all your forces to manage the situation there. If it got out of hand, you had a set of people who could have turned up to deal with it. On this occasion, one wonders if they called out the TSU, if they had them on standby in the first place, and if they called them out to control the riotous situation, the lawlessness and the disorder that took place there. So again, I must come back to it. I'm not departing from this. Public security is a police function. You can have advice coming from anywhere. There have been examples in the past. There have people who've been trained locally and overseas. There are people with experience who know what should obtain. And had the powers that be followed the established pattern to deal with large consorts, and to exercise the command and control over the events that were anticipated to take place. If they failed in that area, you can't ask for a different result.
So we're having it real here and out of the mouth of a former commissioner of police who is saying that the blame should squarely be at the feet of the Guyana Police Force. And I so bow to that, sir, because
No,
the thing is, while we have the promoters there, the Guyana Police Force should have been giving the guidelines.
Exactly.
The policy, and I'm aware that there was such a policy in place. What has happened to the policy? So that's the question we now have to ask. What has happened to that policy that was in place, which stipulates all the ifs and the buts and dotting the I's and crossing the T's when it comes to events like these? Is it that people just get up there and forget about them? Is it that people just decide that they're going to do what they want to do? What has happened? Why is the Guyana Police Force operating the way it is operating now when these were not the approaches that were used before? But we're going to move from that because we need to offer recommendations to the Guyana Police Force, to the Commissioner of Police acting and his ranks. We need to offer solutions. In this day and age, we have concerts. When you go to Carnival, as a matter of fact, in Trinidad, like you said earlier, we don't have glass bottles, glasses, anything that can be used as a weapon. And so that's one of the recommendations we have to push now, that at any event, any big event, we have plastic bottles, plastic glasses, and persons' drinks are being poured into plastic glasses. The other recommendation is that we've come a far way, and we should be using scanners now to allow people to enter these forums. What has happened to those kinds of things?
It is good that you raised the scanner. The scanner was another means they had just come in, and we didn't have our own, but we borrowed. We borrowed scanners. Some private security firms had scanners. In terms of recommendations because I can make several recommendations, but if we go to stick to the failures of this consort, my first recommendation is that we must go back to the situation where we exercise control in the first instance by calling in the proprietors, listen to the conduct of or the proposed conduct of the event. I have a particular view which says, forget about extra duty. The police know what I'm talking about. The police must take control. Assuming that the event is a money-making event, and the promoters might be willing to pay a certain sum for policemen. My experience is that some of them are at the wit's end if the size of the police it's too large for them to budget for. I see this maintenance of peace and good order as being a function of the police. And money should not be an issue. Yes, the policemen might need more money, but the more important issue is the maintenance of law and order and the protection of members of the society. So I think there are instances that would justify, not all, but there are instances that would justify the force taking over the event and managing the security. That's my other recommendation to the ones you have made. The police need to lay down guidelines, the do's and don'ts. I mean, I can say it because I know it has been done. And I'm not here attempting to badmouth the police, not by a long shot. I see an issue and I respond to that issue according to the professional standards I know. So I'm not going to sweet talk the police and make them feel nice. In circumstances where there were big gaps, big errors, omissions, and a neglect, fortunately, I don't think we lost any life. Luckily, we didn't. But the optics from this consort didn't do the police force nor Guyana any good. We have to start from now on. I don't care which overseas artists come. We have to start from now on to ensure that we can manage these large concerts in a way that is orderly, that is free of big-time lawlessness, and that everybody allows everyone to enjoy themselves. I am out of the police force 15 years now, and I know that the practices which I have been outlining here is not distant from the police today. What the police should not do is fail to observe history, fail to observe procedure. They are there, and we should ensure that, as far as possible, that we do not depart. Otherwise, we will be tarnishing the image of the organization and the image of the country. We always got lawlessness when we got these consorts. Other smaller Caribbean territories have them, and they don't have that result. We must guard our image through efficient performance of our duties. That's all I want to tell the police. You fail this time, don't fail the next time. If you make a mistake now, you got to be a fool to commit it again.
So we're saying that we have failed this time, and we need to agree with that. We need to agree to that. And yes, Roxanne Jacobs and Imelda and Lynette, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for your comments too. We have failed this time, but we're not going to allow that to happen again. The other thing is, we have seen as a result, and I don't want to blame the Botheration concert, but we have seen lawlessness again showing its ugly head when it comes to the operation of the members of the Guyana Police Force. We have seen about, I think it's just over a week ago, policemen, the brutal murder of young Bacchus from Haslington on the east coast of Demerara. I think he's just about 22 or 23 years old. And the police have given varying stories of how this entire episode unfolded and this young man losing his life. But we have seen coming forward footages from cameras all around telling a totally different story from what the police have said to us. How do we do it? How do we deal with this? Here is a mother who lost her son. Here is a young 3-year-old boy who has lost his father. As a matter of fact, from reports we have gotten, it says that the baby's mother and the baby came in just the same morning to surprise the father. After not, the father would have seen him when he was a baby, and that was 3 years ago. And later the afternoon, he's dead.
I want to start from the top to examine two things and two issues in the police force: training, discipline, and if I may add a third, supervision. The firearms training. Let me start from when I did final training. You know, a constable on joining the force spends 2 years at the police station, and then after 2 years, he comes back in for final training. I could recall clearly during final training, we had to recite Force Order 33 of 69 in the which sets out when you may fire. Before I left the force 15 years ago, I could have rattled it off. And I want to lay this foundation. A policeman should not fire or should not discharge his firearm unless he is attacked or somebody he's placed to protect is attacked, or there is a serious crime like murder, robbery, rape, and then it is said he should only fire after due warning, if that is possible, because some matters require immediate action, may not have the chance to give a warning, but where possible, a warning should be given. As I understand it, the policeman's firearm is a shield, should be treated as a proverbial shield, not as a proverbial sword. The policeman armed with a firearm is for defensive purposes. Now, tell me, in the Baka shooting, regardless of what the policeman said, whether the action of the policeman was defensive. If the policeman wants to contend that this man was armed, what did he do with the firearm? When he was shot, the immediate reaction, a gun fires, is to shoot back. What did this man do with the firearm? Did he throw it away? If so, then some searches should have been done, because somebody should see that this firearm is being disposed of, and to cordon the area and search to recover whatever weapon it might have been. Failure to do that suggests that there are several holes in the story told by the police. My second observation of that matter is that at the command level of the division, there was a failure to exercise command. My experiences, and don't talk to me about shooting. I've dealt with several shootings. Several shootings. You won't like to hear some of them. And I'm saying without any fear of contradiction that the moment a commander hears about a shooting in his division, he has that responsibility to exercise command over the policeman in the first instance who did the shooting. If he cannot go himself, he ought to dispatch a senior and experienced officer under his command to take control of the policeman, the scene, the injured person.
Especially if it's not a rank from your division.
Whether it is, once there's a shooting, once the shooting, not the individual can come from anywhere, the policeman. Once that shooting occurs in your division, you have to take control of it immediately. Otherwise, it gets out of control.
But let me just stop you a little bit, Mr. Felix. The thing is, I've never been in the police force, but we're hearing that this was a sting operation. Now, if you're having a sting operation, I am almost certain that senior ranks ought to have known about this. At that end, which is special branch, because I'm learning that the young man is from special branch, and at the other end, we're in the division. But from what we are getting is, it seems as if senior officers were not aware of what was happening.
Therefore, it can be a sting operation. It cannot be a sting operation is highly controlled. Highly controlled. You don't know, very many people don't know about it. but the senior administrators in the force in the division would know about it.
Good.
There are instances where headquarters might spring a sting operation in a division and you hardly know until it is finished. But in this case, there was no sting operation. There was an individual who did his own thing and didn't know how to extricate himself from the danger in which he put himself. He did not know how to handle that situation. I don't know what the police action was, but I would have thought that as the information got to the command level, they ought to have taken control. And I don't, if it came to attention shortly after, they should have had the policeman at Kovanjan and the firearm that he used. But, like I was saying, there are a number of falling standards. There are falling standards in the Guyana police force. I get the impression sometimes that some of the junior and some senior ranks are just adrift in what they are doing. It's unfortunate, but you see it. There is no exercise of control on serious, or very little exercise of control. Sometimes the control comes very late, when the situation is out of control. How could he come up with a position that he was on a sting operation? Who organized this sting? Who was in charge?
Well, you know, these are the questions that are being asked. Who organized this? Who was the most senior? Which senior rank you had on the operation?
He must have had somebody who is reporting to. So who is that person?
Well, all of those questions are needed to be answered at this time. But while we are going around and talking about what questions are supposed to be answered and how the operation and what, a life has been lost. And so we have a mother mourning, we have a young lady mourning, we have a son mourning, we have brothers and sisters mourning, nieces and nephews mourning, and an entire community that is enraged at this time. Are we going to continue to have these kinds of things happening? I mean, every time the police mess up, then we have the commissioner of police acting. He's got to go down there and they got to offer words of comfort, and now they're going to launch an investigation. I mean,
the investigation ought to have started the moment the report of the shooting. In my time, a shooting like that occurs, there is a certain process, particularly a policeman is involved. The divisional commander must be informed. By the time you blink, the commissioner is informed, the crime chief. And a decision is taken whether that investigation would be handled in the division or from some team from CID headquarters. We don't hear these things happening now. You hear that there would be an investigation. Where does it go?
Right.
The next thing you hear is that the file was sent to the DPP inquest. And once it goes to an inquest, that's dead. Because we haven't had an inquest in this country since year when. Right? So I'm moving to the point where, because of these escape routes, accountability has suffered. Who is accountable for the death of that man? My view is, where there is reckless police shooting, temperamental police shooting, somebody got to be charged. And shooting which results in injury or death. I'm not in favor of chasing after every policeman who is at cause to shoot and to charge him. But there are certain matters which are so glaring. A policeman is not attacked. Why should a man die? Because he shoots. He is not attacked. His life was not in danger. He may have prepared a story that his life was in danger. Where is the corroboration? Where are the witnesses? The police forget these days that their cell phones and that their actions most likely are recorded a minute or two after, sometimes at the same time.
At the same time.
So you can't come up with
Fictitious stories. Gone are the days for Nancy's stories.
Nancy's story.
We don't get them now.
You can't come up with these stories to excuse yourself from wrongful conduct. You have to be correct in your response to any violent situation because you have the training, you have the power, you have the firearm. And the public expects that the police would use the firearms issued to them appropriately and in appropriate circumstances and not cause innocent citizens, young men, to be killed by the persons from an organization that is responsible for protection of life and property.
Just to protect and serve. And you know, what is most disgusting is the fact that the reports we're getting is that this young man, I think he received 6 shots, 6 bullets, 5 to his back. So I am, you know, the layman on the street is trying to figure out how is it that a man fires at you and then he ends up with all of these bullet wounds in his back and I think one to his chest. How did this happen?
The story does not hold water.
Thank you.
My training says that firing should cease the moment the objective is achieved. So if you are attacked and you fire the 4th shot, the aggressor falls, you're supposed to stop shooting. To fire 6 shots tells me something else, which I want to restrain my tongue.
Yes, and I do agree with you.
Right? But I anxiously await the results of this matter, particularly in regard to the decision or the advice given by the DPP.
But you know what, Mr. Felix, as we go through this conversation, it's now dawning on me that the Guyana police force seem not to want to be able to get evidence and to pull perpetrators in. We are hearing this story that this young man wanted to sell a gun. Now, when you kill this young man, it means that you're killing all your evidence. You can't have a breakthrough. Now, since this young man wanted to sell this gun to you, why, if you had to fire 1 shot or 2 shots, why couldn't you aim lower so that you'll be able to hold this young man and you can get additional information to say who's the gang leader, who bringing the guns, how did you get this gun? But when you kill the young man, you kill everything. Is that the way the Guyana police force is now being trained, or members are being now trained to operate?
Let us go back to Nancy's story. Nancy's story says that this policeman was on a sting operation, albeit we don't know controlled by whom. But let us assume there was a sting operation. A sting operation allows the behavior that causes the sting to be set up to proceed. So if the man come to sell a gun, you had money to buy it. Sting operation would have allowed the policeman to acquire the firearm through a purchase. And when you purchase, you got some other policeman to arrest him.
That's what I'm saying.
That is how the sting operation, the real one, not the Nancy story, the real sting operation. That is why it's a sting, because you allow this behavior to proceed, this unlawful behavior to proceed. You respond as expected by the suspect. You collect his money, and you, along with some other policemen set up nearby, would arrest him and tell him, well, this is a sting operation. we catch you selling an illegal firearm. That is how the sting operation had to go. So that the person in a sting operation ought not to die because he wants money. He wants to give you this gun and collect money. So why would he want to shoot you so that you have to shoot him 6 times? That is where the Nancy story develops.
But then you're hearing now, yesterday, the day before, and today you're hearing about a young lady that is the center of all of this confusion. And so you're here, and in addition to that, the young man who did the shooting, I'm not sure whether it was that young man alone, Nobrick or something like that, I think is his name. I'm not sure he alone fired. But you're hearing that there was another policeman who was carrying out, who quote unquote was carrying out the transaction with Bacchus. And then this other policeman came out from the car or whatever he was in, and he had this gun pointed at the young man. This is what eyewitnesses are saying. And we saw footages of school children running, dashing all over the place, and other citizens dashing all over the place. Now, the thing is, again, sting operations, like you said, don't operate like this. And you have to be very, very careful with the manner with which you fire firearm, especially in areas where you have lots and lots of persons operating.
That is absolutely correct. We were taught, let me start with that very point you've made, that an excuse for shooting, not shooting, an excuse for a policeman not shooting when he should shoot is that he was prevented from so doing by persons in the immediate neighborhood. That's my training. So not because you have a reason to shoot, you just pull a gun and shoot. You have to know the environment where you are and whether it is safe for you to shoot without injuring innocent bystanders. First of all, I learned that since in the 70s. My second position is sting operations are highly structured. Highly structured. And somebody ought to be in control of what is expected to take place. And so my conclusion is the sting was a sting on the police.
Well, and
it stung the police.
Well, it's stinging both ways, because here is it, we have a young man who's dead.
Exactly.
And so that sting is really stinging the family and the community. And then the policemen and the policeman or policemen, they are going to find themselves. And I'm hoping that they have, I noticed the family members and other residents, they were demanding from the Commissioner of Police acting whether indeed the young man was under close arrest. But my thing is, it should not be the young man alone. It should be all of them who were involved, all those who were there with him should be under close arrest. And the folks were also saying they're not comfortable with the police investigating the police because they know what can come out of that. How do we move from there?
Well, you know, when you asked me to make that opening statement, a thought slipped me, and it came to me afterwards. I'm going to make that statement now. When I was a constable at Mahaica in 1971, with less than 12 months service, we had to escort prisoners for court on Tuesdays. And to do so, we had to catch a car at Mahaica and catch the police vehicle at Coven John to pick up the prisoners in Georgetown and bring them to Mahaica. Let me tell you this. I can recall several mornings. By the time I step on the road with that uniform, a car would stop. Officer, can we give you a lift?
Not now. In
hindsight, I came to recognize that was evidence of respect for the police. This less than 1 year constable, people in those days, to have a car, you had to be somebody up there in very many cases if you're not a businessman. And for a member of the public, not once, on several occasions, to stop, officer, can I give you a lift? I took it on several occasions and came off at Cove and John. Now, you will have that reaction by the people at Haslington where the shooting occurred. When the respect, trust, and confidence in the police
It's no longer
has
there.
waned to the lowest possible level. For the police to perform their duties with public support, they have to get the public trust, and they must conduct themselves to earn a public trust.
And
People don't trust you. Just a sec. People don't trust you because you name police. People trust you because of how they see you, projecting your image to them. Then you get that respect. But if, as we see it now, hundreds of people, well, don't let me exaggerate it, a number of young men have been shot and killed by police over the years. And we have hardly had any accountability before the courts.
That's true.
Right? So now, in issues like this one, the commissioner can paint himself in gold and run up there. The people will always say, we don't trust the police because we don't think anything coming out from this. And that is why I said earlier, I am anxiously awaiting the completion of the investigation, the submission of the file to the DPP, and the DPP's findings. This is, this is a bad matter. This is a matter which has touched hearts like some others. That a young 22-year-old man who might be as a father or something like that, right?
Young father.
Has gone, and his child would be left without his support, his love, his guidance.
Apart from that, here is a child who would grow up hating the police because the police killed my father.
Exactly.
And so this is what happens this is what is happening in our society. We can go way back to Shaka Blair in Buxton. We can talk about Johann C. Douglas. We can talk about the 3 young men who were shot where we have DSL there now, and so many other young men who were killed in this country, and up to a day like today, their families cannot bring closure to those issues because nothing has happened. And you know, it's strange. And I must say this. Between 2015, May of 2015 and 2020, August 2020, there was a Guyana police force that citizens of this country had begun to start loving, and they were having relationships with them. Citizens were ready to embrace the police force, to embrace the policemen, to bring out people. I don't know if you remember when persons from Buxton were bringing criminals who were taking refuge into Buxton, they were bringing them out because they had developed that kind of trust again in the Guyana police force. Just after August 2020, the Guyana police force, like many persons are saying, they have made a 360 degrees turn, and we are seeing, I really don't want to use the words to describe them because it's not the entire force, but we are seeing right now how some of those ranks, they were only waiting maybe for a few day to start operating again.
Well, I don't know if some of those ranks are those in the background, but I can recall events in line with what you have just described. And I just want to say this in line with what you were saying, that what occurred in those days was evidence of trust in the police. The government should be setting up or be issuing policies to the force to build trust and confidence in the public. That should come from government. What I am hearing suggests that government like to, elements in the government, not the whole government, elements in government like to handpick and cherry pick matters to deal with and to direct the police how to deal with it. Now, as a retired commissioner, sitting in the seat of the commissioner, nobody tells me how to do the work of the commissioner. If I can't do it, I can't.
Whether you're acting or not, nobody tells you how to do your job.
Nobody. My rule is to tell the government what has happened and how I would proceed with it. Government can in turn say, well, this is our policy in this matter. I have to respect that because the commissioner's role is to implement government policy. But the commissioner has his work cut out, which nobody should interfere with. But I am not so sure that he who sits in the seat of the commissioner is independent in what he is doing, is independent in the performance of his duties. Probably, he likes it that way.
All right. That's another conversation we're going to get into. But I think we have the other guest there that I would want to bring quickly in while we're going to close off on this one, Mr. Felix. Again, security is in crisis. This entire country is in crisis. And I think what we might have to do as citizens of this country is to probably ask and make these strong demands that we have some of the strong commissioner of police who serve the Guyana Police Force, like you and other assistant commissioners and crime chiefs and so on, to come out and offer the kind of help to the Guyana Police Force. And it leads me to wonder, at what stage do we allow police ranks to carry weapon? As soon as they join the force, after 6 months of training, after a year, how long do we have policemen carry weapons? Because one of the things I've noticed is that we have quite a lot of young men in the police force, and you see them having their firearms on them and in manner that is dangerous to the public. So I'm wondering whether there's no training or I don't know.
From what I know, and I'm, again, 15 years out of the police force and going into 16. So I'm like a historian, right? I don't know what is happening now, but I can speak about the year 2006 and before. A person on joining the force, as part of his initial training, will be trained to use firearms in the force, and then before they pass out, they would have had to go to Temeri ranges to prove, to show their proficiency in the use of those firearms. Along the years, every year, there is supposed to be training or retraining in the use of the firearm. I do not know, madam, if those systems are still in place. But for every year, there ought to be an upgrade in the training of the revolver, the rifle, the submachine gun, whatever. If that is happening, good. But somewhere along the line, a little bird is whistling at me to say, it's dead. After they finish the initial training, the upgraded training, developmental training in the use of firearm is now a dead issue. Some people may not have been retrained in the past 5 years. But generally, the system I left and the systems many others left had a facility for training the use of firearm before you use the police force and for an annual refresher upgrading training done annually, right? So I don't know where The force is now on training. But once training is neglected, you will have faulty shooting, irrational, more of it. And more of it will happen. Nobody is going back to the Force Order 33 of 69, which identifies the various circumstances under which a policeman armed with a firearm may fire, not must fire, may fire.
May fire.
May fire. And those words need to be stressed when you're training policemen. It's not that you must shoot because you have a gun or because a situation occurs. It is sometimes a split second thing. And in some circumstances, I'm sorry for some policemen because of how the issues develop in front of them and they had to use the firearm, somebody died, etc., etc. So the system is there. There ought to be training.
And more training.
And more training.
And more training.
All the time. But I don't know where that is now. I can't comment on it. The other issue you raised was about, you raised a second issue concerning what it was.
We talked so much that I can't even remember too, but it might very well come back.
Right.
But the thing is, we have my brother there, Kirk Fraser, who is a teacher and a central executive member. Kirk, good evening to you and welcome to Advancing the Cause. Are you there?
Hi, good night, Coretta, and good night to your viewers. Good night to Comrade Felix.
You might need to unmute. And so while we're going to have Kirk coming in, we have the issue of all of these. Yes, we have Kirk right there. Kirk, good evening to you, and thanks for being here with us on Advancing the Cause. We're talking here about security in a crisis, and we just dealt with the whole issue of the police and the shooting and so on. But the thing is now, we have seen some of this playing out in our school system, and as a teacher, we've seen the two incidences we had at Lodge Secondary School and at New Campbellville Secondary School. As a teacher and as a parent, your thoughts on these issues?
Coretta, I would like your viewers to know that deviant behavior has a root cause. And as an educator, we must look at the root cause of many of these issues that are plaguing our education system. Children don't wake up one day and start to behave in a certain manner. And I'm seeing from the Ministry of Education that we are not doing our homework, or we are probably running away from what we would have learned during our psychology training and so on that we would have experienced at CPC and the University of Guyana. Children demonstrate this behavior as a result of psychosocial conditions that they are experiencing. And as a result of that, we have to look at that and deal with it based on those cases or those issues or those psychosocial conditions under which these children are born and they're raised before we could address the issue. There is no stopgap measure that we can put in place to deal with this situation unless we look at it from a rational perspective. And what I'm seeing happening is that we use a whole lot of stopgap measure instead of looking at the issue in its entirety and dealing with it based on its merit.
Well, I appreciate that. But we have seen, Kirk, the involvement of quite a lot of stakeholders, the Guyana Police Force, the Ministry of Education, its Welfare Department. We have seen parents coming on board. We've also seen searches and so on at some of these schools and what was found. But the thing is, like you said, these behaviors don't just happen like that. As a parent, what is your take on this as a parent? And more so, what advice would you offer to our teachers and to the Ministry of Education officials?
Coretta, my perspective on this is that if we should look at early social deprivation, and if we should look at what Bruno would have said about early social deprivation, is that these experiences are produced and they cannot be reversed as easy as we look at it. So one of the things that I would recommend that in certain schools which attract students from certain catchment area is that we should look, or we should do more work in those communities. Some communities are deprived of some certain basic stuff. For example, in Region 6 or New Amsterdam, where I live, there is a community of Angais Avenue where the children attend the Vrijmans Secondary. And if you should look at the community of itself, that is totally neglected by central government, Ministry of Education, and everybody, you would find that deviant behavior starts in the community. There is no social impact program that is planned for the community. The community continues to be neglected socially, emotionally, and religiously in some perspective. And as a result of that, we are experiencing what we experience. If you look at those two schools, you will recognize that the students that are there come from a certain catchment area. And those catchment areas are being deprived of certain basic social skills and financial, or we can say areas that are poverty stricken. Persons are unemployed, single parent families and so on are very prevalent in those communities. So we have a whole lot of work to do. And I don't believe if we use a stopgap measure, it would help us to solve the situation. You can bring police in every day, every night. You can have all that you want to do, but it would not remedy the situation. These areas need counselors. We need to have after-school programs to help the students, to show them a different life. You know, if we have after-school programs where we show the kids something different outside of probably early sexual activities, and you deal with human reproductive sex and drug abuse and all of these programs would impact positively on the life of these students coming from these areas. And I have not seen the government putting any system in place to deal with the social aspect of the children living in these communities. And as a result of that, generations and generations would come out of these communities being affected because nothing is being done in a comprehensive manner to deal with the situations. You know, and I would say that we have to look at it from what it is, and we are not doing that. You know,
So
parents need to be actively involved. We need to always communicate with parents. And what I find it very difficult now working in the education sector, because the things that happened long ago is not prevalent in our school system today. People are not producing the type of policies that would help our students morally. There are certain values that we need to get back, or we need to implement in our students. For example, I'm hearing now that shortly there will be removal of hairstyle, and children must not come to school looking modest and all of these crap. You know, this is not going to help our situation. We have to look at our moral values, and we have to curtail them. We have to reinvigorate them in our students, so that our students would be aware what is right from what is wrong. And we are not doing that. We are looking to all the Western policies without refining them, you know, and just implement them at a harem scare manner. We need policies that is going to help our students as well as help our teaching staff. What measure of discipline can we use in the school system today to help our students to understand that rules and regulation need to be followed? If the ministry can give me something that I can work with, or we all can work with, as you're a teacher too, we will be in a better place. But there is nothing, there's an absence of something that we can use to deal with our students.
Well, you know, Kirk, I'm happy that you were giving us this perspective from that of a teacher, how you feel about being in the school system now, the policies that the Ministry of Education is having, what they should actually be doing. And it should not only be the Ministry of Education, but there should be collaboration among ministries so that we can deal with some of these social ills in our society. And like you rightfully said, we can have all the systems in place, but if the children are hungry, they're going to misbehave in the classrooms. If the children are coming from families that are broken, and this one pressuring the other one and the other one, and so on, when they come into schools, they are going to find themselves, and they will want to find themselves, and to ensure that because somebody bossing me at home, I got to boss somebody around here. And this is where counseling is important. And I am not sure how much of that the ministry is really looking into. As a matter of fact, let me say this. If we look at some of the areas where we are having these problems, there is little or no help that is being given to these communities. What we do is to, like everything, like everybody else doing, we react to everything that is happening. But we as teachers are the ones who are placed in dangerous pathway, because we have to interface with those students. We have to interface with their gangs when members of their gangs come to the school, just like what happened at New Campbellville Secondary. As we speak, teachers at that school are traumatized. They are crying up to now. As a matter of fact, one teacher said to me, "Miss, every time I close my eyes to sleep, I'm remembering what happened. I'm remembering those boys in the school compound. I'm seeing the cutlasses in their hands." And these things ought not to happen in our schools. But like you rightfully said, we are not putting the systems in place to ensure that our children are catered for in the communities from which they come. Mr. Felix, we still have you here. And we've recognized that we've requested the increase of police patrols in and around those school environs. And we now have Vyman Zervin Secondary, which is another school that I'm hoping that somebody is listening and they'll tell the Minister of Education that we should have those kinds of systems that we've implemented at Lodge and at New Campbellville Secondary, that we implement them at Vyman Zervin before we have something else happening there, because we've seen a couple of episodes there. We have you here, sir. Could you say to us what are some of we have the police there, and the police are searching the students. They have found weapons on them. They even found an air gun. I know some persons are saying that they don't think it is right, it is illegal for police to be in the school and searching the students. Your take on that?
I hold close to the view shared by Sir Cork, if I may refer to you, Sir Cork. And when he spoke about counseling, I think when I heard of these incidents, the first thing that came to mind is that these children came from homes. And the teachers are faced with them from 8, 9 until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The parents are not there, but the teachers have to deal with the deviant behaviors. And unfortunately, in some cases which have gone public, the parents don't seem to support the teachers. As a result of
they need support themselves.
Right. You're correct. As a result, you have a reinforcement of wrongdoing in the children. But do I want policemen in schools? I feel that there is a need for limited police presence. You have a search to do, you invite the police, you search, the police will take possession of the weapons, whether it's a cutlass, a firearm, or a knife. I don't hold a strong view of a permanent or a long-lasting police presence like 8 hours. I don't believe that would work. You have an operation, you want to clean up the school, call in the police, they assist in the search, removal of weapons, and they go their way. Leave the students to interact with teachers. I think in many instances it might be, even though they're exposed to policemen, but in schools, I think they should be more exposed to teachers and person of like image who can talk to them and assist in molding the characters. That is what I feel should be done with young people. The policemen should come, do the work, and go. And leave the molding of children to teachers and those of like mind.
All right. Before we go, I want to say good night to Rosie Jeff and Melissa April and Tiffon Marshall and Vanessa Thomas and Mr. Lee Wickham. Good night to you and thanks for your comments. And yes, we share your view too. And we do admit that under the David Granger-led administration, there was safety and protection and peace in this country. And so we have to have the return of the APNU AFC in order to bring back dignity into this country and peace and the service we need from the policemen. But I know that when we're having a good time, time always runs out on you when you're having a good time, when the program is good. But Kirk, we're going to take your closing remarks and then we'll have Mr. Felix's closing remarks before we put a wrap up on this program. Kirk, I think you're muted.
Yes, in my closing remark, I would like to see the government of Guyana working, and the Ministry of Education working in collaboration with the Guyana Teachers Union, that we could come up with plausible policies. And these policies is one, Guyana Teachers Union would have the experience in what goes on in the everyday school life, So the GTU, along with the ministry, can come up with some of the best policies. I don't think policies should be made in isolation without consulting the people who are actively involved. So I would recommend that there should be more collaboration between the Ministry of Education and the Guyana Teachers Union on these issues. I'm also asking that there should be more investment in certain communities where these kids come from. We should have more investment, in terms of spiritual development, in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of afternoon classes and counseling in some cases. And if we can have sessions where we interact between the parents and the child so we know exactly what is taking place at home. I would also recommend, I see the Ministry of Education have made a decision where they're going to give grade 6 students breakfast. I'm saying in these troubled communities or these schools that deviant behaviors are prevalent, I think that in the morning the students should receive breakfast as well as lunch. Help them in terms of their nutrition, so that they can think, because the brain cannot function if it is not properly nurtured. So we must ensure that those are implemented in these schools, and counseling should be a priority in terms of us having counselors present in the school system, whereby children that have varying problems, whether it's poverty, whether it's peer group pressure, whether it's bullying, they can speak to those counselors and they can receive the necessary help that they so need, so that we can provide a society where persons are more meaningfully, can contribute meaningfully to the society, not filling up the jailhouse and so on. Because that won't solve the situation. You could put up people in jail ever so often, you're going to see they're going to return to jail ever so often. So we need to look at impact programs that is going to impact positively on the life of the
I think Kirk is having some problems at his end. But while we're going to take, Mr. Felix, we'll take your closing remarks before we wrap on.
Thank you very much. Your theme this evening is most appropriate. A crisis in
Security in crisis.
security in crisis
The country in crisis.
is most appropriate. We don't, or we see too many wrongs going on in the society.
That we call right
Yes,
in some instances.
exactly. Every day is something wrong with the police or some infraction by a member of the Ghana police force or by government or some such person. And then we have the school situation erupting in our very presence and in the era of this government. My thing is that good or bad starts from the top.
Yes.
An old friend that I had said, fish that's rotten from here. Some people don't like it if I make the statement. If the government of Guyana sets itself the role of providing policy to ministries like Home Affairs and the police and holding them accountable, empowering them to do their jobs rather than micromanaging, I think we're going to get a better police force, providing that they get the resources, not just vehicles, but they need training. I understand what happened during the period of COVID, but it is time that we get on track and get the force trained.
And let me just add to this. Not only the Ghana Police Force, but we're going to have better education officers who would be able to perform their duties the way they ought to perform their duties and not be having this kind of whatever dangling over their heads where and that's the situation we have now, where officers are scared to talk, they're scared to act because you have politicians who are directing the show and they're issuing what is supposed to happen and what is not supposed to happen when they have no idea of what should be happening there.
The police need, and I suspect this might be similar for other ministries, including education. They need resources. You need resources, for not just buildings. I notice a rush to repair buildings. Good, very good. But what happens in the building? Who's performing in there and how are they performing?
And what do you give to them for performing?
Exactly. Those are issues I think the government should have close at heart and not just talk about it, but make it happen in terms of improvement. We saw for 5 years under the David Granger administration that there was a change in education, the failures, there was an improvement in subjects like, because he emphasized the need to improve the quality of training for children in mathematics and sciences and so on. And his programs and budget went in those directions. And similarly he named the Ministry of Home Affairs, he renamed it Ministry of Public Security to focus on the issue of public security. We go back and we change it to home affairs. What affairs are you talking
So it's
about?
home, just one home.
Right, home affairs. It's time we get rid of that name. The police, the prisons, and fire are responsible generally for public security. And that should be the government's focus and the focus of those services. I don't want to lambaste the police, but the police, I want to make it very clear, have not been doing many things professionally to earn admiration and respect of the public. Though I understand why, I think that if the leaders stop thinking about themselves, stop thinking about promotion, and become professionally oriented, if they fail to do that, the police force will sink. Like I said, fish does rotten from his head. And let's watch the police force under the current heads.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Felix, and thank you, Mr. Fraser, for being here with us. I know we'll have to continue this conversation another time, but this is all the time we have here now on advancing the cause. Before we close, I want to give shout out to Mrs. Tiffany Harvey, the Assistant Chief Education Officer, Secondary, and her entire team who have come on board to work with the Lodge Secondary and the Campbellville Secondary School, New Campbellville Secondary School, and the programs that they've been implementing there, so that we can have a smooth turnover of those schools, and the images of those schools can be transformed. Thank you for doing what you've been doing, my colleagues. And I want to say to you that the Guyana Teachers Union will continue to give the support that we ought to give. Again, we want to ask our parents to know who your children's friends are. Know where your child or your children are. Check their bags to see what they're having in their bags. And to everyone else, be that mother, father, or uncle figure for the children, our children of today. I know that we've implemented all sorts of things, and we're looking to the Western Hemisphere, and we're talking about, oh, I didn't leave anybody to look after my child business or mind my child business. But we're going to have to get back to those days where we allow the community or communities to raise our children, lest we find ourselves in problems. And to the Guyana Police Force and the officers there at the helm, I want to say to you, do your jobs in a professional manner, and the public, the citizens of this country, they're going to love you. They would want to work with you. But if we have rogue policemen in the police force and we're sheltering them, then you're not going to gain the trust of the people of this country. That's all for now on Advancing the Cause. Do stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next Wednesday at the same time. May God continue to bless all of us. Good night.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.